Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another round of the Alpha Touring Challenge Season 5, as brought to you on the premier sim racing platform available only on PC, known as iRacing. And today marks round number 7 of the calendar that keeps on giving. Round after round, we've seen fantastic racing action, and we're here today as we transition over the halfway point of the 13-round season for the Imola circuit in Italy. It is the case the series makes its second visit to the Italian countryside, and what a circuit to go racing at, of course. A circuit which has been home to many a great race in the last few decades, but also some tragedy as well, particularly the 1994 San Marino Grand Prix. But if we look on the upside tonight, it is the case that the circuit, known in full as the Autodromo Internazionale Enzo e Dino Ferrari, named after, of course, Enzo Ferrari and his son Dino themselves, it is the case that our drivers will be taking it to one race tonight, one 60-minute race where it is another Alpha round, and well, we look forward to seeing how it all goes down. The circuit is fast, furious, full of sweeping corners, direction changes and straights, and therefore we can expect plenty of battles time and time again. And speaking of times, it is the case that whilst this is a post-round broadcast, we'll bring it to you as if it were live, with the racing having occurred earlier this week on what was Monday the 22nd of August 2022, and our time for the schedule tonight is as follows. Times in British Summer Time, that's BST or UTC +1. In approximately 14 minutes time, we'll be getting underway with our qualifying session, a 15-minute session to determine our grid order for our one and only race today, and that will be at 8 o'clock this evening, and it will be the feature race, of course, or the Alpha round, as we like to refer to it, where our drivers will be taken to the circuit for 60 minutes of racing action, with the all-important mandatory pit stop thrown into the mix, but more on that in a short order. This broadcast is being brought to you via two media platforms for your viewing pleasure. This broadcast is indeed live, and it is the case you can tune in via either twitch.tv/TX141, or alternatively, if you're more a YouTube user, you can always go to Paul Walsh or TX141TX on YouTube and tune in there. And who is TX141? Who is Paul Walsh? Well, that is I, your host and commentator for this series. It is the case I'm also known as Britain the Spit, and I will bring you all of your racing action for this round, the remaining rounds, and indeed all the rounds that have preceded this one. And indeed, as our drivers get ready to go racing, we do need to take a look at the season ahead, or the calendar as it's gone so far, and what lies in wait around the corner. And as we can see here, it is the case, of course, with 13 rounds, we have cleared our opening 6 rounds. Last time out, we were in Austria at the Red Bull Ring in another sprint race round, and well, in short, we were wondering what the national circuit was going to bring to the table, given it's such a cut-down version of the Red Bull Ring, and it brought us 3 races where in the end there was so much action happening. It was a case, it was rampacked. You would have thought there would have needed to have been at least 10 hours of racing action for the amount of action that occurred in the space of what was that limited period of time of 60 minutes of racing spread over 3 sprint races. But our drivers made it through, and indeed, what a cracker of a round, and it has set the tempo so high, given the fact that we saw battles left, right and centre. We saw 2 instances of 3 wides into turn 1, and today, well, can we potentially see that upped even further? We'll say it's not so. We hope so, of course, but as long as the drivers keep it clean, and it was clean and spectacular racing at the Red Bull Ring. Of course, preceding that, we were at Monza, our first visit to Italy, and this is, of course, our second and final visit to Italy, but Monza was another Alpha round, or a feature race round back on the 8th of August, and a round which really did see a change of tone in the field, given the fact that it was all about straight line speed, and our reigning championship leader of what was Robert Abrams really having a difficult day at Monza by comparison with some of his rivals, and we also saw that at the Red Bull Ring. Could we potentially see that continue here tonight? Well, prior to Monza, it was Alton Park in the United Kingdom back on the 1st of August, and Fuji Speedway preceded that in Japan on the 25th of July, and our first 2 rounds were, of course, in the United States, where it was Laguna Seca that followed after our season opener at Belle Isle. But it is the case, 6 rounds of racing have occurred so far, and all 6 rounds have delivered time and time again. But now, as we look to today, of course, with the racing having occurred on the 22nd of August at Imola, and still lying in wait is the sprint round in a week's time of Donington Park on the 29th of August back to United Kingdom for the second and final visit on the calendar to United Kingdom. And then we do have the run to Brazil for the Sao Paulo circuit, or Interlagos, on the 5th of September, and that will wrap up the first half of the season. When you break the season down based on its break period, where we'll have a week's break between round number 9, and then, of course, we'll be back on the 19th of September in terms of the driving, albeit the broadcast will be a few days later, but we'll be back for round number 10 at the Canadian Tire Motorsports Park, or Motorsport as it's known in short, for our final sprint race round of the season. The last time we'll have 3 races in a single evening, and, well, we've got a lot to look forward to at Motorsport in the fact it's a very fast circuit, and indeed the equivalent of the British circuit of Thruxton. If you've heard of it, definitely check it out if you have not. or check out Motorsport indeed. But then it will be the case that we return to the United States for our final 3 rounds. Started off with Mid-Ohio on the 26th of September, which is, of course, an Alpha round. Then another Alpha round at the revival place of road racing in America in the state of New York at Watkins Glen on the 3rd of October. And then we bring it all to a close on the 10th of October with Road Atlanta. And highlighted in pink there for the fact it is a special round. We don't know the exact details. They will be revealed closer to the time. But Road Atlanta is where we bring the curtain down. Also known as the Petite Le Mans Circuit, of course, but Road Atlanta definitely going to be a season finale thriller. But before we get to our finale, we must first go for our next few rounds, and our round for today is, of course, at the Autodromo Internazionale Enzo e Dino Ferrari, located near the town of Imola in the Emilia-Romagna region of Italy. This circuit named after Enzo Ferrari and his son Dino, of course, being dedicated to Dino, who passed away before his father initially, and then it was the case that when Enzo Ferrari passed away, the name of the circuit was extended to include both members of the Ferrari family. But this circuit, as you can see from the circuit map provided to us by simracingwiki.com, is made up of 17 official corners, albeit you would argue that some of the kinks here are not really effectively corners, but we're going to roll with there being 17 corners, and it is the case that this circuit having a very high speed run all the way up to the Tamburello chicane of turns 2, 3 and 4. Of course, Tamburello used to be a flat out left-hander at high speed with high downforce cars, but especially given the incident in 1994 where we said goodbye, unfortunately, to what was Ayrton Senna in that major incident at the Tamburello corner at that time, not the chicane. And of course, the race weekend in Formula 1 in 1994 being cursed with the passing of what was, unless I'm mistaken, Roland Ratzenberger the day before in the qualifying day. It was the case that in the end a number of safety revisions were made to the Imola circuit, and one of them was that Tamburello was turned into a sweeping chicane. Indeed, a brilliant chicane sequence of turns 2 through to 4, and when our drivers have conquered that, they charged down towards the Villeneuve chicane, the second of the 3 chicanes on the circuit, charging up towards Villeneuve at turns 5 and 6. A bit different because it's more reliant on a trail braking entry into turn number 5 and in a heavy braking zone for turn number 6. But once they've emerged from Villeneuve, they'll head up to Tosa corner at turn number 7, an uphill hairpin. That's right, it's the case. The braking zone and the turning apex is uphill, would you believe it? And that means that our drivers have got to be very careful about balancing throttle with understeer as they try to escape the hairpin and charge up towards Piratella, reaching the highest point on the circuit almost at Piratella. And as they make their way through the left-hander at turn number 8, they'll find themselves coming downhill very quickly into the Aqua Minerale sequence of turns 9 and 10. The double right-hander, it's all about a tap of the brakes into turn 9 and then balancing the car hard on the brakes and straightening the steering for the very tricky turn number 10. But as they make their way out of there, they'll head up to the final chicane, the highest point of the circuit at the Alta chicane of turns 11 and 12, and indeed the slowest set pair of corners on the circuit, with the fact that we do see that our drivers having to navigate their way over 2 very high curbs there, and indeed with the track limits being quite aggressive in iRacing, our drivers may have to go between the curbs, not over them. But should they emerge safely through Alta, they have to make their way down through the kink of 13 into the Ravazza double left-hander at turns 14 and 15, also quite considered to be a hairpin made up of 2 halves, but then they make their way out of Ravazza through the kinks of 16 and 17, down the Bassa Straight to complete a lap, and they go all again, and it's going to be a very high average lap speed here, not the highest on the calendar, but one of the highest, and well, you've got plenty to look forward to in qualifying when we bring you some on-board laps. But as for our rules, today, given it is an Alpha race round, our drivers will have their car fuel loads restricted to 41 litres. It is the case that mandates a pit stop, and we can see that there in the rules set there is a mandatory pit stop in which drivers must take on fuel, but a tyre change is entirely optional. On top of that, if a driver accumulates 9 or more instant points, they shall pick up a drive-through penalty for their sins, and if they go up to 16 instant points, they will be disqualified from the race. So they've got to be very careful here, and I would imagine that given how strict the track limits are in iRacing at this circuit, it could be the case that we see quite a few drive-throughs. However, it's also the case that there's many bonus points available, and 1 point for pole position first and foremost, that's in the qualifying session, the overall pole position, 1 point for the overall fastest lap, 1 point for the Sublime Finesse Award for the fewest instants over the round, 1 point for leading a lap in the race, regardless of whether you are in the Delta or the Alpha class, almost sneezed there, and then 1 point for the Naked Aggression Award, most overtakes over the round by a single driver. Now, it is the case we won't be able to bring you the post-round standings going out of tonight. It will be the case we instead bring you the round standings going into tonight in terms of those championship standings, and we can see it is the case that after 6 rounds of racing, Robert Abrams continues to lead the championship, albeit with a margin is gradually being shrunk, now down to only 37 points over Francois Shink here, and it is the case that Shink continue to try and close that gap, but with the two rivals both having difficult days at the Red Bull Ring, they are both in hot contention for that win, but Robert Abrams with that advantage that never seems to quite go away. Can Shink make a dent in it tonight, a significant one, or will it be the case that we see John Lauzon, who's really risen to form, trying to get a bit closer to Shink in the battle for P2? Jerome Virgil lands a P4 there on 236 points, only 3 points clear of David Bauer, who in turn is ahead of Logan McKenzie on 223 points, and then we do have Connor Achatella there in at P7, our Delta rookie, who is leading the Delta standings in P7 on 202 points. He is charging the way, and there's a sizable gap between him and his rivals, more on that in a brief moment, but also there we see James Carr, Gurkan Demir and Matthew Shepka completing the top 10, but as we look to the 11th through to 20th positions, you can see we've got a long way to go to Daniel Sedino down on 119 points, who's our second place driver in the Delta class, but it is the case between him and that top 10. You've got Daniel Smith, Micah Hendricks, and also Justin Rhodes there from P11 to P13. Aaron Law in P15 are battling Aaron Law last time out at the Red Bull Ring. We look forward to seeing more from him. Now 2 points clear of Gus Blondell. Gus Blondell looking very fast over the last few rounds, having a difficult day at the Red Bull Ring in P16. We're expecting more from him tonight. And then we have Giovanni Romano, Adrian Fedorowski, Travis Orr, and Eric Statzer, who complete the top 20 there, down to 64 points on Eric Statzer. But then outside the top 20, looking from 21st to 30th, we have Wiley Cox, who after a brilliant start to his season has fallen slightly down the order by comparison with his rivals, but we look forward to seeing him return in the near future. Not in attendance tonight, unfortunately, from what I've heard on my data sheet, but it is the case of the 62 points there. He is 7 ahead of Corey Fluke, and well, it was the case that last time out, Corey Fluke definitely enjoying the racing at the Red Bull Ring. Unfortunately, we're not going to be seeing his Audi Rs3 take to the circuit tonight. We're only going to have the one Audi, and that will be in the form of Fernando Takahashi, who's down there in P27 and gradually building more and more points to his tally. But between the two Audi drivers, of course, we have Michael McLeod, Alex Jensen, Jesse Bodaz, Casey Nemetz, and then we have Takahashi in P27, and then Jonathan Stroll, Paul Mikolajczyk, and what is Scotty Lund completing that top 30, and then outside the top 30 there, but not to be forgotten about Spencer Cockayne, P31 on 19 points ahead of Brandon Vez, Dom Savio, Sean Gurd, Steve Hansel, and then Jorge Zuniga completing our standings, 36 out of 36 drivers. But as for the team standings, it is the case that Beaver Buzz going into tonight on 661 points, holding an advantage there of what is, unless my brain doesn't do the maths correctly, 71 points over Yellow Flag Motorsports. But indeed, this top three continuing to oscillate between one another in terms of the points deltas, and do not count out Breakfast for Dinner nor Torque Steer Racing, and particularly Torque Steer Racing, who seem to be finding their feet every so often, and when they do, those points come in very quickly, and they are trying to close that gap to Breakfast for Dinner. Blue Flag Motorsports, the best of the rest of 296 points, with QZ Motorsports there on 87 points, and Gasparilla Motorsport, last but not least, on 6 points. But that's enough about rules, regulations, standings, and the circuit. Let's head back to those live pictures, ladies and gentlemen. We are only moments away from going racing here at Imola, starting with the qualifying session. And as we look down to other drivers making his way around, here is Dom Savio in the Hyundai Elantra making his way out of the toaster corner. Now, you may be wondering, over the course of talking about the standings, we mentioned Alpha drivers, we mentioned Delta drivers. Well, it is the case, of course, we have two classes as of this season, and our Alpha drivers are denoted by a blue sash between their driver name and their position number, which you can see on the time and town on the left-hand side of your screen, and you can also see in the bottom left-hand corner the currently being viewed driver, plus also their position number and their door number, and also which team they're part of. But the coloured sash there represents their class, and if they've got blue, that means they're Alpha, or our Pro class, if you will, and if they've got a purple sash, like Dom Savio here, it is the case they are in the Delta class, or in other words, the Pro-Am class. And whilst it is the case that our drivers all score from a single champion points pool, so it is the case that whether a driver wins overall, or alternatively wins in their, well, if a driver wins overall, they get the maximum possible points, but if they win in their class but don't win overall, they don't get the winner's points. They get their points based on the overall standings, and that's why we have that single standing sheet, if you will. We don't filter it based on Alphas and Deltas, because everybody at the end of the day is battling for position, and it is the case that our Delta drivers love to take the fight to our Alphas, and indeed Adrian Fedorowski had plenty of battling to do last time out at the Red Bull Ring amongst some of those Alpha drivers who were struggling for pace by comparison, and we look forward to seeing how the QZ Motorsport driver from Canada in the Honda Civic Type R today can perform in the number 22 car here. He's got the bit between the teeth, and we look forward to seeing what he's able to achieve with the Honda, which won't be too strong on the straights, but it will definitely be strong through those corners in those heavy braking zones, where of course that Honda's got the strongest brakes out of any in the touring car racing class based on the current balance of performance of iRacing. But as he makes his way on out here, we look to Jerome Virgil as making his way up the hill, the Beaver Buzz Energy driver, and of course being in contention for major points last time at the Red Bull Ring, but also in a little bit of the hot seat with regards to some of the incidents that occurred. Indeed, there were a few elbows popping out and some major battles between drivers, which did get a little bit rugged and aggressive, but at the same time, of course, all drivers absolutely enjoying it, and Jerome Virgil has no exception to the rule as he makes his way there through Aqua Minerale and heading up towards the Alta chicane. But he's not going to be able to make it there, given the fact that the time is up on this practice session. We may just about make it. We may have a slight delay. In fact, he does make it, but very shortly we'll be jumping over to qualifying. But as we do look from our screens to the chat, we do say hello in the YouTube chat to both John Lauzon and also Paul Mikolajczyk, and it is the case of both of you there. I hope you're doing well, and we see John Lauzon saying hello, looking forward to this. I am as well, John, and well, Paul Mikolajczyk, I should say, saying I respect this track, but does it suck? Well, it does not always suit everyone. The Imola circuit, of course, with its nature being very heavily focused around direction change, it is one of those circuits which can be difficult for some to find a balance. Personally, for me, as a sim racing driver, I absolutely love it and would love one day to visit the circuit, perhaps even drive around it in person. But I can definitely say it is one of those circuits which can catch a driver out, so I can understand it may be a little bit of a Marmite circuit for some. I'll be honest, before I even put my first sim racing laps around this circuit, I hated it based on the way it looked, but after I went out there, I absolutely love it. It's one of my favourite circuits in motorsport in terms of to drive on a simulator, and well, it's the case here. So other drivers may absolutely love it as well. And if you are tuning in on the YouTube, alternatively the Twitch media platforms, it is the case that we have the chats available so we can see what you've got to say, and well, we're not expecting any of you to be naughty or anything like that, and it is the case, of course, we do have a little bit of censorship in place, but that's just the automated censorship as per our media platforms. But it is the case, of course, do let us know how you're doing, whether you've had a great week, because it is Friday, of course, and also let us know your thoughts on the circuit and who you're cheering on. If you're one of the drivers who took part in this race, of course, and know the outcome, do not spoil it for those who do not, because at the end of the day, no spoilers please. I, as your host and commentator, do not know what's happened. It is the case I've done my best to avoid any spoilers whatsoever, but the only thing I have heard is this one is going to be a thriller. But to be fair, they've told me that for all 6 rounds so far, so I think it is the case here. Every round is going to be a thriller, whether they tell me so or not. But as our drivers make their way on around here, it does look as though we are once again having some slight issues with our timing tower there. It does seem as though those lap times have come through prematurely, and it does seem to be a little bit of a bug that comes through every so often, which is unfortunate, which means we are going to be effectively spoiled, I think, for our qualifying times here, but that's a limitation of technology. We are still trying to get that fixed. We did think that issue was not going to occur with the feature race replays, because it hasn't plagued us so far, but what has not going to plague us is the ability to be able to see David Bauer take us around for the first flying lap of his qualifying session, and as he makes his way through the kink of 16 and onto the kink of 17 very shortly, let's ride on board with a Hyundai Elantra driver as he makes his way down towards Tamburello turn 2. So going through the left-hand kink of turn 1 here, completely flat out, and sighting his brake mark here around the 100-metre board, about 125 metres, coming down the gearbox here and clambering over the apex curves here in the touring cars, which you can do. To be fair, these are heavy cars and they can be chucked over those raised curves. As he makes his way out of Tamburello, accelerating all the way up now towards turn number 5, into Villeneuve he goes, and as he breaks his way and trail braking here, you can see the car stepping out on the rear end there into the first part of Villeneuve. The idea being, of course, the brake bias is very far back on the car towards the rear brakes to get rotation. As he makes his way into Tosa here, you'll notice taking a bit of a U-shaped approach, going for a bit of a later apex, and then getting on the power nicely as he makes his way onto the apex and charging up towards Piratella, heading up the hill now in towards turn number 8 here, accelerating up into 5th gear there, just on the rev limiter in 4th before shifting to 5th at the last possible moment. And as he rolls his way through, taking a bit too much apex curve then, that's sending the car wide, a bit of understeer being knocked into the car's front end as he makes his way down the hill into Aqua Minerale, braking there for the first part of turn number 9, and then rolling into turn number 10. They're going all the way down to 2nd gear, and as he rolls on out, using plenty of apex curve and also exit curve in there, as long as he keeps 2 wheels within the white lines of the circuit, and now heading up towards the Alta chicane. Braking at the 50-metre board, they're braking as late as possible and trying to straight line between the apex curves there, whilst keeping 2 tyres within the white lines. And as he makes his way out of the corner there, a nice flying line for David Bauer as he heads down towards turns 14 and 15. In his case, heading down towards Rabat, so he rolls his way down the hill through the kink of 13 and then braking at about 75 metres there, using the 50 board on his right as a marker. And as he clambers over the curves, it is the case you really want to hound the curves here as you make your way through 14 and 15, and now heading towards the timeline here. It's a nice lap back from David Bauer, and of course it will be a little bit spoiled in the fact we do have those times already up on the screen. There's nothing we can do about that, but as he heads to the timeline, a smooth lap, and that's exactly what you want here at Imola. But that is a 53.561, and I can imagine as the fuel comes out of the car, and indeed the track does come up to a little bit more temperature and a bit of rubber's laid down, those lap times are going to come in very quickly indeed. But as we see our drivers making their way on around here, it is the case we do see Matt Shepka here rolling his way through turns 2, 3 and 4, rolling through Tamburello right now. And in terms of the run of form we're seeing, of course this is an open setup series, our drive setups are not fixed. It is the case they can make the setup changes they so desire to the car, albeit they do have to work within the engine power and the weight constraints of the car itself. We're expecting the Hondas here to be very strong in the race. We're not expecting them to go strong in qualifying for the simple reason that the Honda is not the one lap pace car. It has not been so far at all this season. It is the case the only circuits where it shows great one lap pace are circuits where it's able to stay in the lower gears for a longer period of time, where its weaker straight line speed is not exposed. But here at Imola, we've already seen on our first on board lap with David Bauer in the Elantra, there was the case for the best part of the start finish straight, running up into 6th gear, and indeed most of the lap does see our drivers at some point heading back up into 5th gear as a minimum. And well, the 5th and 6th gears of this Honda are quite compromised in terms of the car's ability to get up to top speed. It's very snappy through 2nd through to 4th gear, but as soon as it hits 5th, it's almost as if it hits a wall in terms of speed. But conversely, with those strong brakes and the fact that the car does very well both of the launch at the start in terms of getting up to temperature faster than the other cars, and also it has that great durability in its tyres and brakes going deep into the races, we're expecting our Honda drivers to start off relatively slow, but then build up momentum as the time goes on. Conversely, when we talk about the Elantra and we look here to what is James Carr behind what is Shepka then making his way into turns 14 and 15 through Ravatsa he goes, we're expecting the Elantra to be at the other end of the spectrum. The Elantra so far has proven to be the qualifying car, and indeed has proven to be the race car for the first half of a given race. Now, whether it's been a sprint or alternatively what is one of our alpha feature races, the 60-minute races, regardless, the Elantra has been the car to beat in the first half. But then, when we start to see that tyre wear accumulate, indeed that brake wear also starts to build up, it is the case that the brakes start to fade, the tyres start to really hurt, the front tyres in particular, and the Elantra drivers are known for putting as much brake bias towards the rear as possible. A brake bias of somewhere in the region of about 39 to 41% towards the end of the race to try and protect those front tyres, which get absolutely shredded. And if it is a hot race as well, if we've got a high track temperature in excess of 100 degrees Fahrenheit, it is the case, and you can do the maths in converting it to Celsius and Kelvin if you so desire. It is one of those cases whereby, as we see there, Shepka coming into a bit of difficulty with a car, or really I should say it's the other way around. Car, they're closing up behind Shepka, and I think the two drivers, they're misinterpreting one another's signals as they make their way up the hill. But the Elantra does start to really suffer in those high temperatures, and well, right now it's not looking to be quite that high temperature at the circuit, but perhaps later on the temperature will come on up and it could be the bane of the Elantra's success. But then we do look to the likes of Micah Hendricks here in the Blue Flag Motorsports Hyundai Veloster, and the Veloster has been the car that keeps on giving us surprises time and time again, particularly if you're Micah Hendricks with his absolutely brilliant pace behind the wheel of the car. In the fact it's not quite there in terms of the pace of the Elantra on one lap, and it's not quite there in terms of its ability to preserve tyres over the course of the entirety of the race. So it does fall away a little bit in terms of pace towards the end, but not as aggressively as the Elantra. So it seems to be the jack of all trades, the master of none, but indeed something that's got a little bit of everything under the bonnet. And you can imagine here that Hendricks right now showing great qualifying pace here, as in fact he does improve, so not all those times are accurate. It's the case, I think those times are actually carrying over from our practice session, which is unfortunate. So we will see those times coming in, but Hendricks does improve to a P3 there as he puts a wheel on the grass. Oh goodness me, and well, it didn't look as though he put a wheel on the grass, but literally coming into that braking zone into Tamburello, the rear right tyre, just as he tried to turn on in there, just tapped to the grass, and when it did, all the grip goes on that rear right tyre and the car slid sideways. But that's the limit you've got to run to here, in the fact that Imola really is a circuit where you have to use the width of each and every corner entry in order to get the lap time. If you don't, then you lose a major amount of time. There is so much in the rhythm to this circuit, those direction changes, and well, in cars which naturally want to understeer, these front engine front wheel drive touring cars, it is the case that you want to be able to swing the car into the corners. And as they make the way on out here, we can see that Hendricks right now trying to recuperate that momentum momentum. But indeed, watch out for the Veloster. It is the case. It's going to one of those cars which is an all-rounder, and an all-rounder may not be a bad thing here because this circuit is a fast circuit. There's no doubt about that, but it is also a punishing circuit, and you need that balance. But speaking of a balance, we look from Wes Hendricks to Dom Savio here, who currently what is our fastest driver in the Delta class as it currently stands, as he makes his way down the hill towards Ravazza corner here. Looking good so far for Savio. Can he continue this form? He's currently on what is a 1:53.78. He just previously set that lap, in fact, and well, can he go even faster and move a bit further up the order? We will have to wait and see. But as he makes his way around, of course, we haven't talked about the one other touring car. We've only got one driver here representing it, and it is, of course, the Audi Rs3. Now, it's a bit of a unicorn car, of course. We've only got two of them in our paddock, but it is the case. The Audi is one of those cars. Oh, goodness me, as we see Takahashi, they're carrying a bit too much speed into the second part of Acque Minerale, and I think the rear of the car being unsettled there through turn number 9, and he has to gradually bring it back onto the circuit via the gravel trap, and then return on what is going to be the left-hand side of the circuit, which a lot of drivers will try to peel over towards later on in the exit up towards Alta. In fact, you want to be on the left-hand side for the Alta chicane, but it looks like Takahashi is staying on the grass to make sure he doesn't compromise anyone's laps. But to be fair, on our circuit map, you can see it is the case now that he will be clear as he makes his way through where's the chicane and heads down towards Ravazza corner once again. But the Audi Rs3, could it be good here is the big question. Potentially it could on the straights. It is a fast car on the straights, but through the corners it may be a little bit of a difficult car, given the fact we've got a lot of direction changes, and the Audi isn't the happiest car when it comes to direction changes. It's a car that prefers a very stable circuit whereby the corners are separated by considerable runs. We do have considerable runs between corner complexes, but we've got a lot of chicanes, and the Audi does come unfounded there through those chicanes as we see Takahashi going onto a lap. And let's ride on board here with our Delta driver as he heads across the timeline and makes his way down towards Tamburello. He's going through the kink of one here in 6th gear, top gear, and almost hitting the rev limiter in 6th as he breaks his way there at the 100-meter board into turn number 2, and you can see they're fighting with the steering wheel and trying to get the car through Tamburello, bringing it through nicely there through the apex of 3 over the curb in the 4, and as he makes one out, as we see Adrian Fedorowski there promoted to P14. Is the case. We see Takahashi charging down towards what is turns at 5 and 6. Through Villeneuve he goes, and you can see that the car just not wanting to bite under that shift from the left into right, and indeed having to fight with the car, but he brings it up towards the Tosa hairpin out through turn number 7 here, and it's these more traditional single style corners, these singular hairpins or singular left and right handers such as what we've got coming up in the form of Piratella. That's where the Audi will do better, and as he makes his way uphill in 5th gear here, getting ready to come down to 4th gear, rolling his way through the left-hander, nails it very nicely, a very smooth run there through Piratella, and as he heads down to Acque Minerale, he'll be looking for his brake mark and left that 50-meter board, dabs on the brakes, down to 5th gear, and oh goodness, we had a transitional downshift there through the Acque Minerale turn at number 9. We had to go from 6th to 5th mid-corner, and then down to 4th literally as he went into turn number 10. Well, the Audi's gearbox is also a bit of a difficult one, and I think that may explain why on his previous lap he had that difficulty at Acque Minerale. Indeed, the car looks very unsettled down the downshift as he comes through Alta, no such concerns, absolutely planted through the chicane, and now heading down towards the Ravazza corner. As he makes his way down the hill here, it is the case it has not been a perfect lap in terms of what you perhaps would expect from a driver who is absolutely nailing it, but to be fair, Takahashi running at his own pace, and he can't be besmirched for that as he makes his way through turn number 14, through 15, and he has set a few personal best sectors here, comes out to turn number 15, and now heading up towards the timing line here, and as he makes his way to the line, what's it going to be for Takahashi? Can he improve from the bottom of the field as it currently stands? 3.9 seconds off of that provisional pole, and well, in the end, he does not improve. He lost out massively in that middle sector, and he's still got a way to go, as that was a 56.479 compared to his previous best, that was a 56.20. But as he makes his way on around here, we've only got 2.5 minutes or so left, and of course, as soon as the clock strikes 15 minutes, it is the case we do not allow drives the overtime. We will be jumping, as I understand it, straight to the formation of the grid. So now it really does become the case that everyone's trying to deliver their final laps. As we see here, Micah Hendricks not getting that much closer to our top 2 right now. It does look as though here the Veloster can only go to P3, but meanwhile in the Delta class here, we do see that Daniel Sedino currently P3 out of Delta drivers, P13 overall, as he makes his way through Piratella here on what will effectively be his last lap, as we're to understand. understand it, with the lap time coming in just shy of 2 minutes. And as he makes his way through, you can see the car becoming unsettled there and running so much rear brake bias. The problem for our drivers who run a lot of rear brake bias through Aqua Minerale is the rear end wants to step out naturally, and when you're coming downhill with a dab of the brakes and then into a right hand like that, we're trying to carry a lot of speed. You can imagine our drivers are going into Aqua Minerale in excess of 100 miles an hour, and by the time they get to the braking zone for turn 10, they're still approaching it at about what is at 90 miles an hour, so if not more than that. It is the case that the rear end of the car does become very unsettled, despite the fact the weight of these cars is towards the front, but that means all the weight shifts right onto the nose of the car, over that front axle, and when it does, that's what causes the rear to lift up and the car to become unsettled. And that's what we saw there for Dino as he made his way through Aqua Minerale. The car just did not want to respond, and he's decided enough's enough. He comes into the pits, and as he does, Justin Rhodes improves to P11, 1.5 seconds off that provisional pole, which is owned by his teammate of James Carr, who, as he makes his way and coming through there, the second part of Ravatsa, can he improve to raise the bar for that pole position? It's currently at 52.295, and as he heads to the timeline here, James Carr, what would it be as he crosses the line? It is going to be for him, well, not an improvement in the end for James Carr, but I think it's still enough for pole position. Still 30 seconds left, and we do have Jerome Virgil right now making his way through what is Villeneuve, but I think he is bringing the car to a halt. He knows he can't finish this lap. Can anybody else improve whilst they're out there? We've got Takahashi heading up towards what is Villeneuve. He won't have enough time, and what I think that is it, ladies and gentlemen. With 10 seconds to go, whoever is out there, I do not imagine is going to find any more time out on the circuit, because when the checkered flag comes out, our drivers will immediately be jumped out to the pits, and then we get ready to go racing, and that is the 15-minute mark. And as they make the way on around, unless it is the case, well, we're having a bit of an extended qualifying session here, but I think it will end prematurely for some drivers, as we do see here Hendricks making his way to the line. Or will it end prematurely? Well, Hendricks is going to end that lap prematurely by running wide and managing to get it into the pit lane. And in fact, we can see that Bout also coming in as we do wait for with our last couple of drivers out there. But I do believe that is qualifying complete. And well, Robert Abrams, we didn't really talk about him too much on championship lead up at P8, and just behind him on what is the row behind that fifth row will be his teammate of Logan McKenzie, who'll be starting right behind him there. And well, it is the case, I think Yellow Flag Motorsports, I don't know what's exactly happened, but ever since really Alton Park, well, no, in fact Monza, it just has not been the same in terms of that momentum they've had. To be fair, McKenzie has been keeping it consistent, but Abrams just has not quite had the momentum we've previously seen from him. And in terms of momentum, well, can Fernando Takahashi turn the poor momentum of this qualifying session? He'll be starting from the back and turn it around in the race. To be fair, it is the case that qualifying is only one part of the conundrum. It's only a 15-minute part of a 60-minute conundrum, which is the race. As we see Takahashi come into the line here, I don't think it's going to be an improvement. What about for James Carr as he comes to the line? Well, in fact, Takahashi does improve slightly, and there's James Carr. He does set in the better lap, which is that 52.286, where it is the case we did have the overtime for qualifying in the end. Well, I was very mistaken there, folks. But as now qualifying is complete, it is the case we do wait to go racing here at Imola for 60 minutes of action. And as we do continue to wait here just a little bit longer, I do believe it is the case we're waiting for what is the lobby on our replay file here to transition on over. In terms of surprises we saw in the qualifying session, well, it is a breakfast for dinner lockout on the front row. They have definitely decided to have their feast early and get a good start to the race. And well, can they carry the momentum through come the race? That would be the big question. But also Micah Hendricks from Blue Flag Motorsports there on that second row. And you can imagine the Velocity driver will be looking to get the jump on his rivals in the run to turn number 2, and then John Lauzon alongside him. Keep your eyes out for John Lauzon. His momentum has been building round after round, and I wouldn't be surprised here if John Lauzon's looking for a podium today. He's been showing a lot of tenacity in the last couple of rounds. But meanwhile, in terms of a bit of surprises further down the field, weren't perhaps expecting what was a pole position in the Delta class from Auguste Blondel, given the pace has been shown, but it's Dom Savio who's taken that pole in P10. And well, we are missing Achitella today, so it is the result that we are going to be seeing potentially a new winner in that Delta class, and we'll have to wait and see who it is going to be. But we get the transition over to the race, and it's time for us to go through the grid. So as we look down the grid here for round number 7 of the Alpha Touring Challenge Season 5, as brought to you at the Imola circuit in Italy on iRacing, it is the case line up on that front row. James Carr taking pole position and the bonus point for a 152.295, 3 attempts better than anybody else. Indeed, his teammate there lines up alongside him on that front row of David Bauer. Behind them, Micah Hendricks and John Lauzon, they line up P3, P4 with Jerome Virgil and Matt Shepka, P5, P6. Shepka having one of his better qualifying sessions of the season in P6. We look forward to seeing how he gets on in the race. And then we have Daniel Smith and Robert Abrams behind on the fourth row, with Logan McKenzie and Dom Savio our pole sitter in the Delta class P9, P10. Behind them, we then have what is Daniel Sedino and Aaron Lahr, followed by Spencer Cockayne and Jesse. Well, in fact, we missed out Justin Rhodes and Auguste Blondel, but it's too late for that, ladies and gentlemen, because we're now waiting for the lights. And it's lights out and away we go here for round number 7 of the Alpha Touring Challenge Season 5 as all of our tries get underway. And as they charge their way down towards turn number 2, it is the case that James Carr here going defensive versus his teammate into the first major corner. But as they all come down here, we look a bit further back. Logan McKenzie getting a good start. In fact, getting the jump on his teammate has all got a bit of smoke there. And that looks to be Micah Hendricks, who's been in a bit of a war with what is, I believe that's the breakfast dinner car. We've got 4 wide, surely not, coming down towards turn number 5. Down towards Villeneuve they go. Now they've got to settle this surely as they make their way into the corner. Indeed, everybody does make it on through, but that looked to be a very near the mark moment as they all made their way out of the corner and head their way up towards Tosin as they roll away for a left-hander here. Hendricks having a difficult start and Shepka battling with him, as meanwhile, we said they had a difficult qualifying session, but they've had a much better start to this race. Yellow Flag Motorsport up to what is a P5, P6, but as they make their way up the hill, we can see that Hendricks here battling with Shepka, and we'll try and go around the outside now as they roll the way in front. We've got a slow down there. Well, it's Robert Abrams, I think it is the case. He's had a slowdown for track limits, and he's dropped all the way down to P10 there as everybody else tries to make the way on through. But indeed, quite the start to this opening lap, and as they make their way into the second half of it, we've still got more to come here in this lap as they roll their way through Acque Minerale, and as they head up towards where's the Alta chicane for the first time of asking here. We can see Aaron Lahr's feeding in the move here coming on for P12. He's going on the inside of Dom Savio into the chicane, and as he rolls his way through what is the right into left, going around the outside, makes it count, and now heads down towards Ravazza in at P12. A nice move there from Aaron Lahr to gain the place of Torque Steer Racing. But as they head down the hill, we look to our leader here of James Carr, who as he makes his way through the second part of Ravazza, the final major corner, and before they complete this first lap, it is the case. He's had a good start here, but it hasn't quite worked out for breakfast dinner in its entirety, because as James Carr comes to the timeline to lead onto lap number 2, behind him he has John Lauzon in P2, who has gained since the start, gaining 2 places. Jerome Virgil, his teammate for Where's Beaver Buzz, also gaining 2 places. They make the way into lap 2. David Bauer dropping 2 places since the start in P4. Logan McKenzie P5 gaining multiple places, 4 places gained at the start. A brilliant start for the Yellow Flag Motorsports driver. Micah Hendricks P6, a difficult start for him, now making a recovery. Matt Shepka losing 1 place in a P7 as we see Daniel Smith P8, and a bit of a coming together there for Justin Rhodes and Robert Abrams. And as they return to the circuit with Justin Rhodes in at P9, Robert Abrams P10, we just caught the tail end of that. And as they make the way down towards what is the Tamburello chicane, well, Abrams out of position here after returning, and right now, oh goodness, being behind Aaron Lahr and Dom Savio in contact, and Dom Savio goes for spin, turns down the exit of Villeneuve, and it is the case that our pole sitter in the Delta class is having a dismal day at Monza so far. After a brilliant qualifying session, he's now in last but not least in P18. Meanwhile, Daniel Sedino, now your leader in where's the Delta class here in P12. It is the case that Blue Flag Motorsports driver having a little bit of a peek to the inside versus Aaron Lahr in Spiritella, but he can't quite find it as they make the way through the left-hander. And he has to wait his turn instead. But as they make the way down the hill from Piratella, heading up towards Acque Minerale, this time Auguste Blondel behind here. And Blondel, having had a difficult qualifying session, definitely looking at punchier in the race in terms of putting in those lap times and going hunting after positions here. And in front of him, of course, is the Delta leader, his fellow class driver, who is leading the class, and he'll want to gain that place off of him in order to get some key points on his rivals. But as they make the way on down, we can see here Jesse Butters looking up the inside to outside into the Alta chicane. And as they make the way on through it, Butters gets the move move done up the inside versus Adrian Fredorowski. And to be fair, the two Honda drivers here in a little bit of their own battle, given the fact the rest of the field is trying to break away. But to be fair to them, it is a case both battling to be the best Honda in the Delta class. And right now, it's Bottas ahead of Fredorowski as they head down towards Ravazza once again. But as they roll the way down the hill, of course, a long way to go. And whilst we've only got 18 drivers in attendance today, quite a limited field compared to the 20 plus we're used to, it is the case. Whilst we may not have quantity, we still have plenty of quality. And speaking of quality here, it is the case that we do see that Daniel Sedino's lifted off there versus his teammate. Now, whether that was the case, that he's had a slowdown of some description, has Daniel Sedino, we're not sure. But Spencer Cockane also coming through here, and Daniel Sedino going very slow. And look at Takahashi flying them down. That's got to be a slowdown penalty for Sedino. There's no other way that can be, unless he has got a major problem with the car. He's going very slowly, the Blue Flag Motorsports driver. I think he's trying to burn a slowdown of some sorts, or is there a technical issue with the car? Well, he's coming back up to speed now. I think that's a slowdown that just would not go away. And speaking of not going away, well, it is the case that Logan McKenzie is proving that Yellow Flag Motorsports is not going away anytime soon, as we ride on board the P6 driver in what is the wonderful Elantra, running with the number 4 door number. And as they roll the way into Piratella this time, he's trying to harass and hustle Hendricks at P5 right now. And whilst it is the case that normally it's been Robert Abrams who has been the big name of Yellow Flag Motorsports round after round, today it's the McKenzie show, and he's going on the offensive here to show that it's not just about his teammate as they make the way out of Aqua Minerale once again. But to be fair, it is a team effort. Of course, they work together hard, but McKenzie definitely fired up here, and we love to see it as he makes his way into the chicane right into left. And as he comes on out here, you can see Hendricks getting the better run there, and it does seem as though this Elantra a little bit prickly by comparison with the Veloster over those high curves. And as they make the way down, when we say prickly in terms of just not being as composed, oh goodness me, now what on earth has happened there? Jerome Virgil into the wall, and we only just caught the tail end of that. And I suspect there must have been some contact with David Bauer of some description, so we're hearing there's been an off track for David Bauer, who's running in P3. He was P4 when we last saw him. And indeed, Jerome Virgil is jumping to the pits, and that will put him a lap down. Plus, he's got the repair work on the car. And can we see anything with regards to David Bauer's car? As he makes his way under the gantry board there, we can't see anything. So was it just the case Virgilio's involved in an incident of his own doing, or Bauer? Well, given the severity of the whack, and normally to see a car turned there for the kink of 13, we do not normally see it until S2 cars are coming together. I would say there was some sort of incident, because Hendricks has closed out very rapidly by comparison as they make the way down towards what is here into the Villeneuve chicane. But of course, we can only guess and posture at what could have been. And right now we focus on what is present on our screen. And David Bauer right now batting for that P3, trying to hold on versus Hendricks as the top two have broken away 3 seconds clear or so. And that is John Lauzon chasing after what is Bauer's teammate of car as they make the way up the hill towards Piratella. But as they come on through, it is the case. We see Shepka here back in the fight after what is a bit of a difficult run of seasonal form so far. In fact, that Honda has not been on the pace, but the Torque Racing driver has time and time again tried to get the most out of it. And here today, he's looking good as he rolls his way down through turn number 9 and into 10. And behind him, of course, we do have Daniel Smith, another driver, and of course, fellow Torque Racing driver alongside Shepka, who has definitely had a bad run of form, albeit Daniel Smith seemingly finding the worst possible luck each and every race. It is the case, if he doesn't make a mistake, then somebody helps him on his way off the circuit. And we saw that at the Red Bull Ring time and time again. And well, the number 95 driver in the Veloster today, right now, running happy in the waifu machine. Can he stay on the course right now and look for a potential move on his teammate, or are they going to try and work together here and do a little bit of fuel saving? Well, we'll have to wait and see. As meanwhile, we can see here Hendricks looking up the inside of David Bauer into the final part of Ravazza. He made the move, or attempted the move into the first part of Ravazza, not to be. And as we ride on board the gearbox here of David Bauer, you'll see there is the case here. Elantra does have the top speed advantage as they make the way down the start-finish straight. But in return, of course, in the slipstream here, Hendricks will be able to punch into that space created by David Bauer's Elantra in the charge down towards turn number 2. And as they make the way down here, Bauer's going to have to think about going to vents here. Or does Hendricks go for it on the inside? He's going to take a look. Bauer's left the door open, and I think this could be critical as they come on through side by side through, and Hendricks once again finds himself taking a visit to the grass there at turn number 3. But it is the case, they're just carrying a bit too much speed, and to be fair to Bauer, he gave the space, but in the end Hendricks could not hold it around the outside. And as they make the way on into Villeneuve, McKenzie up to P4, and Logan McKenzie picking up the pieces which are left by the wayside of his rivals in front right now. McKenzie definitely playing this one smart and in the draft where he can. And well behind, you can see now that it's the case that Daniel Smith thinking about a potential move. Meanwhile, Robert Abrams here battling with what is just inroads to P8. Or yes, it is P8 as they make the way up the hill. And Abrams here trying to go round the outside as they make the way up towards Piratella. But to be fair, Rhodes can keep his nose in. It's only going to go one way, and that is too wide through Piratella. You can't normally go too wide in GT3 cars or higher, but in touring cars you can at Piratella. And Robert Abrams, to be fair, despite Rhodes keeping his nose in, Abrams holding that outside line and making it work, staying in P8. As they make the way on out at this point, it is the case. Heading up towards the Ultra Chicane, well, the battles are continuing here, and we're only just about to reach the top portion of the 10-minute mark as they make the way into the Ultra Chicane once again. And as they roll the way on through, we look from them to a bit further back, and in particular here to what is Spencer Cocaine, who's had an off-track by looks of things at Minerali. He returns to the circuit, albeit losing multiple places. He's lost from P12 all the way down to P16, and Cocaine having a moment. But meanwhile, speaking of a moment, Micah Hendricks here under difficulty with regards to the fact that he's got McKinsey chasing after him. And as they make the way out to Ravatsu, we've got a four-way battle for P4 as they head down towards turn number 2. They head on to another lap. They go on to lap number 6 here, and it's Hendricks at the front of this pack. But for how long, of course, and McKinsey here feeling very racy today. Hendricks defends the inside. He doesn't want to yield, but he puts the car in the middle of the road now. Surely they're not going to see a free wide down here. As you can see, Daniel Smith makes the move on Shepka. I think they've changed places there, to be fair. And I think it's the case that Smith feels so he's got the pace at this point in the race to push the momentum, whereas I think Shepka is playing more of a long game here, and Shepka being quite smart, to be fair, if that is the case in terms of working with his teammate in this pack. And behind we can see Robert Abrams leading that battle for P8 still, albeit Rhodes right on his rear as they make the way out of Villeneuve and head up towards Tosa once again. But 10 minutes complete, 50 minutes still to go, and as they roll the way on out through Tosa, it is the case that Abrams right now definitely feeling the pressure here as Aaron Light in P10 in a bit of a no man's land, and Auguste Blondel is your leader as it currently stands in the Delta class. But meanwhile, making their way up towards Tosa, we can see Daniel Cedino just passing Jesse Bodas for P3 in the class, P13 overall, after what was a little bit of a fall down the order earlier on, but he's now returned to his starting position in terms of starting P13 on the grid. But as they make the way up towards Piratella, it is the case that we do see Daniel Cedino right now really trying to push on, and Fernando Takahashi, remember I said about watch out for Fernando Takahashi, that last place in qualifying is not indicative of what he can do in the race. He's running P2 in the Deltas right now, P12, and that is testament. Takahashi goes very well. If he doesn't get it in qualifying, he will find it in the race in terms of that momentum and consistency, and he's showing it here in the number 998 car in the lone Audi Rs3 as he makes his way into Alta once again. And I think the pack behind him right now is trying to think how they can make their way past the fast accelerating Audi, where they've got to find it in the corners. But meanwhile, speaking of finding it in the corners, it is the case here that McKinsey, having fallen back off the back of Hendricks, now has got to find a way of keeping ahead of Daniel Smith behind as they make the way towards the corners, because that velocity, the better of the two cars through the corner apexes. And Smith here in the draft has got alongside, he's pulled alongside as they head down towards turn number 2. It's Smith up the inside in towards Tamburello, and as they head on in into the left, right, left, it is the case that McKinsey doesn't battle this one too hard, but Smith goes a little bit deep, hits the sausage curve on the apex of turn 3, but defends through 4 on the inside. He gives McKinsey just enough space, but I think despite his defense it's not going to work out. A little bit of a shake of the nose there on the car from Logan McKinsey. I'm not sure there whether he's just trying to see if the steering's still working as expected, or whether there's been a bit of contact, so he's trying to see what's broken, or whether it's the case he just decided to do a little bit of a mini celebration there, passing Smith. But regardless there, McKinsey, well, it's the case. This is the McKinsey that we have been waiting to see. We saw a glimpse of, of course, at the Red Bull Ring, but this is a charge from the Yellow Flag Motorsports driver here as he makes his way up towards Piratella, and as he rolls his way into left-hander this time around, it is the case that whilst our Alpha drivers will calm down a little bit, Takahashi meanwhile having to defend here for this P12 versus Cedino as they make the way out of what is Tosa and heading up towards Piratella side by side here versus the Blue Flag Motorsports driver is the privateer. And as they make the way into Piratella, well, I think it's the case that Cedino feels as though he's got the grip and he's got the pace, he goes around. But meanwhile, Ride on board here with Adrian Fedorowski from QZ Motorsports as he makes his way down into Aqua Minerale running P15. He's still got a face for Jesse Bodas there in the Honda Civic Type R in front. And as they come out of the corner here, it's the case the two Honda drivers really find themselves locked in a deadlock in terms of pace, and right now both trying to harass the back of Takahashi, albeit Boda's a bit closer, and Spencer Cockane behind Fedorowski right now, I think starting to put some pressure on as they make the way through the auto chicane this time around. But as they do, we look from our 15th place driver to a bit further up the order, in particular to David Bauer, who has once again had Micah Hendricks close on up. And Hendricks right now, despite having the off track earlier on, he has not letting it phase him in terms of his pace. He's going to look round the outside here, down into turn number 2, and he's going to go outside to inside. This is going to be brave here from Hendricks. Can he make it work this time? Yes, he can. He's up into P3 as he rolls his way through turn number 4. Mike Hendricks gains a place. David Bauer down to P4. Meanwhile, further back, we've got Daniel Smith battling here with what is Justin Rowe to P8. And I think Daniel Smith's been involved in some sort of incident in the fact that he was at one point battling with the likes of Abrams and Shepka. But I think it is the case now. It's not quite worked out for Smith, and he's dropped on down. And meanwhile, a bit further back, we do see that it is the case that Jesse Bodas has had, oh, goodness me, now the privateer. He's parked up there. I think he's just waiting for the circuit to clear. But was he involved in some contact with fellow drivers? We're not sure. We know he's gone off track, of course, at Tamburello. Indeed, our cameras tell us that, but it's the case we don't know what exactly happened, and we can't take a look back due to limitations of the replay file we're using. But meanwhile, it is the case he'll get himself back up to speed, but he now finds himself 6 seconds off his nearest opponent in P16, and that is Dom Savio here, who we look to, and of course our pole sitter in the Delta class, involved in that early instant, and now he's got it all to recover. But to be fair, and to his credit, he is the fastest of our Delta drivers, indeed faster than a good number of our Alpha drivers so far, and running well right now, the number 81 driver. And if he can keep his composure, there's no reason why he can't bring this on back. But we are hearing meanwhile that Jerome Virgil has had an incident, and he's jumped to the pits after incident turn 13 earlier on, and that was absolutely unfortunate for Virgil. And right now in the pit lane, the car's being serviced again. But as our drivers make the way on through, and we do say hello there to Logan McKenzie in the YouTube chat, saying jumped into this race after 15 minutes of practice and 12 hours of real world road tripping, was super exhausted afterwards. And we can completely understand about that, McKenzie, because right now putting an absolute flyer on you are as you make your way across that timeline, and now charging it down towards turn number 2. It is the case that Shepka here staying with him, and to be fair to the Talksteer racing driver, enjoying a great race for what is the 490 car. And as he makes his way through Tamburello, trying to put that pressure on McKenzie, and I think the Honda is now starting to open up in terms of its ability to deploy that pace that it has locked away, with its ability to last longer than other cars on the tyres and the brakes. And as he makes his way into Villeneuve this time around, Shepka definitely now started to come alive. Those lap times are moving upwards, and the only drivers faster than Shepka right now are the top 3. He is putting that pressure on for P5. But as we also say hello there to Assuming One, saying great broadcast again. Glad you're enjoying the broadcast, Assuming One. I hope you're doing well. It is the case here that Shepka will be doing well if he can find his way past P5 driver McKenzie as they make the way up towards Piratella. And of course, for a quarter of this race now complete, things have calmed down a little bit, although I say that hesitantly because I'm sure the drivers will prove to me as soon as I say things have calmed down, we'll then get a storm of overtakes and battles, as so has often been the case. But as we now move deeper and deeper towards the halfway mark in particular, we'll now see some of our drivers start to think more about the strategy in terms of, do they go for the undercut, do they go for the overcut, alternatively do they just simply come in at the midpoint. Also, have they gained enough places yet? Do they feel as though they're in the right place in the field before they can make that pit stop? Because track position at any circuit is useful. Some circuits it's more critical than others. We have seen here it's not overly easy to defend at Imola. You can defend, but it does take a lot of time out of your race, and there have been so many chicanes where overtakes are possible, indeed heavy braking zones. It is a case that overtaking is much loved in terms of the ability to go for moves time and time again. This isn't like the Hungaroring, for example, or other circuits in the world where overtaking can be very difficult and only attainable at individual isolated spots of the circuit. Here at Imola, you could argue that most corners, minus Wes Aqua Minerali, are overtaking places, and our drivers are definitely showing that. But as they make their way across the timeline this time, Shepka stays in that P6 now, but just putting a personal best of the race at 54.59. He's definitely building up for a move in the near future. But as he makes his way through there, we look a bit further back here to our Delta drivers, and it's Spencer Cockane here in P15, who's 5th in the class as he makes his way through. But we look from 5th in the class to our leader of the class, and Auguste Blondeau here, the Blue Flag Motorsports driver who stayed out of trouble. He's gained places, he's gained the lead of the class, and right now running on around in P11 overall. And Gus Blondell here definitely trying to pick up some major points here today as he makes his way down towards Villeneuve. And I think he'll be hoping that he can use today's race as the impetus to be able to change Achatella later on in the season, because we have seen small bursts of the pace of Blondell where he's been able to match Achatella, indeed surpass him in some instances, but every time he has shown that pace, something has gone wrong. And think back to Fuji in particular, where he was shown great pace only to be involved in a major incident towards the end of the race, and also think of the rounds that followed that, Monza for example as well, where it didn't work out for Blondell. And it is the case now, the number 17 driver really being given an opportunity to shine here as he makes his way on down the hill towards Acque Minerali. But as he does, we look to our leaders right now, and you can see it is the case that James Carr is starting to break away a little bit from John Lauzon. James Carr making his way down the hill into Avanza, and meanwhile Lauzon now following suit. But I think the Beaver Buzz driver right now may be thinking about the long game here, given the fact that, remember, we do have a very low drive-through penalty count limit, so these track limits will come back to bite our drivers if they're not too careful and instead of rather liberal with those exit curves, indeed those apex curves, those exit curves in particular. The one at Tosa, well, from what I've been hearing from our drivers, it is the case you put even close to all four wheels beyond the white lines and it is a 1x or an instant point immediately, and that's what you do not want, and that's what our drivers need to be aware of here. And I think John Lauzon at this point, 90's within arm's reach of the lead of this race, and James Carr's not too far away in terms of pace, but right now just settling it down and making sure to get into that long-term rhythm. And speaking of that rhythm, will we ride on board here with championship leader Robert Abrams, who as he rolls his way in towards Tamburello, it's now the case that we do have a yellow flag motorsport sandwich. And on the filling for today, it is Talk Steer Racing's Matt Shepker as they make the way down towards Villeneuve. And in this battle for P5 right now, it is the case that Abrams, after what was a difficult qualifying session and quite a slow start to this race, now he's definitely starting to build up as he makes his way down towards Tosa, or up towards Tosa we should really say. But look at the amount of work he's having to do on that steering wheel, the rear of the car. That's the brake bias towards the rear, just showing you how much work is going towards those rear brakes and how unsettled the guys, but that gives them the rotation. I can only imagine with that much rotation in the car, as the tyres start to wear down towards the end, it is going to be a very tricky car to drive, and Will Abrams will be no doubt aware of that, given his choice of car. But at the same time, he's got Daniel Smith all over his six as they make the way through Acque Minerali here for what is for them at the 11th time of asking. And as they head up the hill, it is one of those cases where it looks like Smith's going to look for the move here. Smith trying to go to the outside as they head in towards the Alta chicane. The Talk Steer Racing driver trying to get his nose ahead, but it is the case Abrams covers him off as they roll the way on through. Meanwhile, a bit further back, we can see that Adrian Fedorowski batting it with Spencer Cockayne here, and as they make the way down the hill out to Piratella, surely Dom Serra's not going to try and make it too wide. Well, no, Spencer Cockayne and Fedorowski are going to make it too wide into Acque Minerali. We'll say it's not so earlier. It was the case I said that's the only place where we're not going to see overtakes, and Adrian Fedorowski says, hold my beer or hold my Dragon Balls. It is the case running in that Dragon Ball Z livery, and he makes the move done for P14. The QZ Motorsport driver there defying what is the expectations and moving up a place, and Dom Savio now thinks, okay, well, we've seen them both battle. I want this now because I'm the fastest of the Delta drivers as they make the way down towards Ravatz. But of course, catching is one thing in the words of Murray Walker, passing is another thing. And as they make the way down towards Ravatz right now, this is a Delta class which is definitely coming alive, as I'm very sorry to announce at the same time that Jerome Virgil, unfortunately, its race is no longer alive. It is the case that with that second major whack to the car which saw him jump to the pits, it is the case that he has had to retire the cars. We're to understand it. But meanwhile, into the pits is Spencer Cockayne. Now, is this a pit stop or is it a driver? I would expect it could be a potential pit stop. As he makes his way on down here, we'll wait and find out about that. But meanwhile, we must look away for a brief moment because Robert Abrams is under pressure here from Daniel Smith, who continues to battle with him as they make the way up the hill towards what is Piratella. And I can confirm to you, in fact, Spencer Cockayne has come through for a drive-through penalty. He's leaving the pit lane. He did not stop. It is the case he has reached that ×9 instant count, and therefore he will visit the pits later in order to actually take a pit stop. But meanwhile, we're here speaking of pit stops, so I don't think it's going to be on the mind of even them right now, and Daniel Smith definitely trying to go for this P7. He is relentlessly harassing the rear of Abrams right now, and well, the Talk Steer Racing driver, I think it's the fact that he's enjoying this race and at the same time thinking to himself, compared to the Red Bull Ring, I haven't been knocked about. He's definitely had some moments so far, but nothing like what happened at Red Bull Ring, and he is absolutely loving it as he makes his way down towards Ravatz here. And as we ride on board with the Veloster driver here, you are seeing two cars of the same manufacturer with two very different approaches to the touring car racing class, and as they make the way down towards Aratsa corner here, it is the case that Elantra will be much faster down the straight, but this little Veloster that could is completely hounding the rear of Abrams out of the corners and through the corners, and as they make the way towards the timeline here to complete lap number 12 with 23 minutes complete, so another what is there 37 on the clock. It is the case that racing is not going anywhere, it's staying on circuit, and we love to see it as they make the way down towards Tamburello, and you can see that it's going to be the case that Abrams defends the inside. Smith trying to go round the outside. Well, he's going to have to go all in here to get the inside into three. There's a bit of a door up between the two of them. Abrams is knocked to the grass slightly, and Smith will argue all that it's just an elbow out. That's touring cars for you. Abrams, I think, won't be too happy about that, but he's right there behind him. It's not a major loss to Abrams, but I think the tempo has been set, and Daniel Smith gets through to P7 as they make the way through Villeneuve, and as they head up towards Tosa here a bit further back. Don Savio now trying to make his way past Adrian Fedorowski after Fedorowski's move on what was cocaine only moments ago, and Dom Savio going round the outside there, and despite the Honda having the stronger brakes, I think Adrian Fedorowski there not feeling confident to challenge it under braking, and indeed Savio gains the place and continues that recovery drive from the back of the field after starting on pole in the Delta class. It all went wrong in the opening laps, and now he's up to P4 in the class, P14 overall. Still 3 drivers on the hit list. Starting off next, Takahashi up in P13, 4 seconds up the road. But as they make the way into Tosa here, it is the case that Dom Savio right now showing no signs of letting up. The fastest Delta driver on circuit by over a second as a minimum, and it is definitely flying right now, is that Privateers Hyundai Elantra as he makes his way into Piratella. As he rolls his way on through the left-hander here, it is the case we look back to our leaders and what we talked about a little bit earlier about the fact that as they make the way down at where's the start-finish straight here, how Lauzon was falling back a little bit from Car but keeping him within distance, and the gap has actually come down quite a bit since we last looked at it. It's come down from 1.5 seconds back down to about 7/10 of a second on the start-finish straight here, as the blimp camera gives us a wonderful view of the extent of that start-finish straight. And as they make the way down towards what is turn number 2, it is the case we see a James Carr here continuing to work, but at the same time I think Lauzon at this point now starting to feel the itch, which is the itch to go racing here, and as he makes his way up towards turns 4 and 5. I do wonder, given the fact the arrival of what is Top Gun Maverick in cinemas recently, and of course a very popular movie, and it is the case I can imagine a number of our drivers have seen it, who here right now is feeling the need for speed, and well, it is John Lauzon in particular who is feeling that in the fact that he has been gaining, and the last lap he set 2 purple subsectors out of 5. That was sector 1 and sector 3. He is definitely right now being a bit of a maverick in his own right, which is to take the fight to the breakfast for dinner driver in front as they roll the way through the left-hander of Piratella. But as they come on through here, I do see there in the YouTube chat from Logan McKinsey, who we look back to here running in P5, confirming with regards to that little wiggle with regards to the front end of the car when he made the pass on what was Daniel Smith a few laps ago. The wiggle was a little haha, I made you go deep. Well, that's a little bit cheeky, but to be fair, that's what the rivalries are all about in the Alpha Touring Challenge. And indeed, if you're wondering what are our drivers like outside of the circuit, well, they like down in the paddock, and indeed on the Discord where they're able to communicate with one another, it is a very gentlemanly and a ladylike community. In the fact that at Alpha Touring Challenge it is the case, there's quite a bit of banter in the paddock, but also it's the same time in terms of the racing stays on the track, and indeed out of the track it is the case they all work together. Indeed, a number of drivers do share laps with one another in order to help one another improve their competitiveness. It's a great community and everybody spurring one another on, and well, season 5 has only continued on from season 4 so far. I think it can all be agreed, and here's the fact that right now we do see James Carr, who as he leads going down in towards turn number 1 this time around, Lauzon is definitely closing the distance here, and I wonder now if James Carr is perhaps thinking that he needs to find a different tempo here. Will he consider going into the pits early, or will he decide now he's got to play the defensive game? Well, he's got to make a decision very soon, because John Lauzon there taking plenty of apex curb at turn number 3, sending the car up onto 2 wheels, in fact, for a brief while. And, well, it's the case that suspension can take a whack or two, but he won't want to do it too often, because it is the case at the end of the day, these cars are not indestructible. They can collapse on that suspension if they hit the curbs too hard and too square on. But to be fair, a couple of whacks to the sausages are not going to hurt too much. And as Lauzon rolls his way out of Tosa here, we ride on board with our second place driver, who right now continuing to hunt down our leader. as they head in towards Piratella this time around. Of course, we've seen it's the case that these two are no strangers to battling one another. We saw battles between them earlier on in the season, dating all the way back to our season opener at Belle Isle, as they roll the way down to Aqua Minerale here. What's very interesting to see is the way they're both approaching at these corners where the car's going to be on that knife edge of balance. And Malzahn does look a little bit more composed in those trail braking zones compared to Car, and Car is gaining as a result of it. But the return of it all is the fact that the car is looking as though, because it's on such an edge, that he may be taking quite a bit out of the car in terms of that tyre life. And as they roll the way out of Alta this time, the gap does open up a little bit here, but Malzahn, to be fair, not exactly falling back into the distance. He's only dropping slightly back, and then in that toe, gradually closes up into Ravazza. And as they roll the way on through here, Malzahn definitely right now getting the better run into Ravazza 1 and coming through Ravazza 2. There's barely anything between them. The only difference is Malzahn, they're taking a bit more apex curve. And as they make their way down the start finish straight, Malzahn thinks about coming into the pits there, and I think he decides no, not to do it. And to be fair, it is the case, I think, feinting there to come into the pits. Well, it is the case that James Carr will have the initiative in terms of choosing to pit first if he so desires, as we do see there Jesse Bottas coming out to the pits, having made an early stop, and I believe that was a scheduled stop for Jesse Bottas, to be fair. They're going down to P17, but meanwhile into the pits comes Robert Abrams. Now, it is the case, pitting at the 29-minute mark. Now, is this a scheduled stop, or is it the case that it's a drive-through? We've already seen one drive-through, or one confirmed drive-through, we should say, in the form of what was Dom Savio. And in fact, it is the case that the Robert Abrams comes into the pits. It wasn't Dom Savio. In fact, I'm trying to remember who it was now. But Abrams in for his scheduled stop here. And meanwhile, David Bauer running in P4. It is the case that Logan McKenzie is closing up. I wonder whether we're going to see McKenzie come in soon, or whether Yellow Flag Motorsports have decided to split the strategies. Well, it's going to be a telling one, that's for certain, as we're hearing Abrams is leaving his pit box right now, and he is going to come back out in what will be P16. So he will be, no, in fact, he'll be P15, because Don Savio is into the pits. And, well, in terms of who made that pit stop earlier on, it is the case. We haven't quite got that confirmed on our time machine. In fact, it was Dom Savio. My apologies. It was Dom Savio who had to come on in for, what was that, a drive-through penalty. And now he's gone into the pits. This time for his scheduled stop, we can confirm. And as I try to make the way around here, Logan McKenzie, I think, will have a pit stop on the cards very soon, because he makes his way for Aqua Minerale. He's starting to show that aggression coming out the corner and heading up towards Alta here. Will he try and effect a pass here into Alta? He's close enough to think about a lunge on the brakes, but to be fair, sending the stamp from that far back, I think it is going to be a difficult one as they make the way through Alta and down towards Ratza. And as they charge on down at this point, the halfway point of the race is reached, and we've got pit stops on the cards. And speaking of on the cards here, well, a potential top 5 is on the cards for Torx iRacing Shepka as he makes his way on down the hill. 3 attempts or so off the pace of the drivers in front on that previous lap, but to be fair, he's staying right there with them as he needs to right now, and that is what he needs to keep on doing. And as they make the way to the timeline, is there a pit stop for any of them? No, they all stay out once again. But meanwhile, speaking of staying out here, we can see, looking back to our leaders, James Carr for breakfast or dinner, who will ride on board the gearbox, yet to come into the pits as we end Justin Rhodes and Aaron Lahr into the pits as well. So it is the case that a lot of drivers further down in the midfield are pitting, just towards the bottom of that top 10 or outside the top 10, and that actually will start to breathe a sigh of relief for our drivers up in the higher portion of the top 10, in the fact that if they do come into the pits, they won't be coming out in traffic. As we see Justin, sorry, not Justin there, James Carr, I should say, going a little bit deep, going out of turn number 7 and heading up the hill. We can see a flash of lights there from John Malzahn in response to James Carr doing a little bit of a wiggle of the car. Now, was that the case that he's trying to send some sort of message there, or is he just trying to tease Malzahn? Well, regardless here, this battle continues its way down in towards Aqua Minerale, and as they roll their way through the double right-hander here, Malzahn not showing any signs of going away, staying right there in the wheel tracks. But meanwhile, we look a bit further back here to McKenzie versus Bauer for that battle for P4, and as they roll the way on around, we've also got into the pits Daniel Sedino, also Fernando Takahashi for their scheduled stops. And as they roll their way on down through into Aqua Minerale, at this point you can definitely get the feeling that David Bauer is under pressure here, and that pressure is becoming very, very intense indeed. For as they make the way up towards Alta, it's the case now, does McKenzie go for it? No, he's close, but he thinks better of it. He'd rather wait to going down into Ravazza, alternatively the run down towards Tamburello once again. But of course, we could see one or two of these drivers defect their way to the pit lane come the exit of Ravazza 2, and who will it be? Also, keep your eyes on Shepka here. It is the case that he's just waiting in the wings for that opportunity as Malzahn is into the pits from P2. He's decided enough's enough. He's coming on in, And as they make their way through Ravazza 1 and Ravazza 2 this time around, will we see any one of the three peel on in? Well, I think it's going to be the case. There goes Logan McKenzie. McKenzie calls it. He reveals his hand. And now Shepka follows on through. But as they make their way up towards Tambrella, our drivers who stay on out here, has McKenzie made the right call? Can he come out in clear air and go hunting? That'll be the big question. Meanwhile, speaking of going hunting here, where is the case of Fernando Takahashi ahead of Daniel Sedino after the pit starts. Well, Sedino up the inside here into Piratella, but Takahashi tries to come back, but Sedino parks on Apex there. And Takahashi, I think, was almost caught blindsided by how quickly Sedino got the car stopped into Piratella. And I believe I was as well in the fact that I thought it was going to be the case. There was going to be a lot more room on that inside, but Takahashi there in the end, great cat-like reactions. And now he's got Dom Savio behind him, who wants to try and make the move on the Audi driver as they head up towards what is the Alta chicane. But Dom Savio at this point, I think, will wait until what will be Ravazza or the run down the start-finish straight. As we hear that Gus Blonder was into the pit from what was at the time the lead of the Delta class, and as he makes his way on in, and he's just gone past my commentary box window, it is the case that we continue to watch here Fernando Takahashi, who finds himself now having to defend versus Dom Savio as they roll their way through turn 14 and into 15, and as they come through the devil left-hander here, 34 minutes on the clock are completed almost, and we've still got plenty of time to go, still some pit stops on the cards as well. It is the case that our driver's trying to push on here, and the Delta class just as intense as the Alpha class, and indeed battles left, right and centre. Spencer Cockayne in the pit lane there, parked up for his scheduled stop. They're putting the fuel in the car, but meanwhile, as we look back to Takahashi here, it is the case, not able to get close enough to look for the move on Sedino, but able to get far enough away from Savio to stay ahead for the time being. And as we ride on board the gearbox here of our 13th place driver P4 in that Delta class, you can see Savio here squirming left, right and centre. He's looking for a vulnerability here. He's thinking about it into Villeneuve. He looks up the inside, but too far back. He tries to get Takahashi to go deep. Takahashi does go deep, but he brings the car back together very nicely. But as they make the way up towards Tosa, it is case Savio takes a look. He goes very late on the brakes, and well, I think Takahashi saw it coming in the end and opened the steering wheel. That was only going to go one or two ways in the end. It was either going to be a coming together, or Takahashi had to open the steering wheel, and Dom Savio judged that well. But to be fair to Takahashi, a lot of respect to Takahashi for keeping the door open there when he could have closed it, to be fair, as he started to turn in. But meanwhile, we see that James Carr leaving the pit lane. He's coming for his scheduled start, and here is John Lauzon. It is the case that the two of them stand separated now. And how much they separated by since pit stop season. Micah Hendricks also in and coming back out in P3 as we're to understand it. Here comes Hendricks. What about Shepka? There's Shepka, P4. He's, oh goodness, it's going to be close here between the two of them. They squirm the way out the pit lane. It's side by side coming out the pits, but in the end Shepka has to back off and he loses out there. But at the same time, you can see that. And look at Logan McKenzie coming on through. This has worked wonders for McKenzie. He's gained the places. He's up to P4 once again. But as he makes his way through Tambrello, the key thing is he's put a couple of seconds distance between himself and David Bauer, and that is absolutely critical. Whereas he rolls his way through Villeneuve, he will need that time now to go hunting after Hendricks, and in return now Shepka's going to have to really push after missing out there by a hair's width in terms of being able to jump out in the pits. The two of them side by side coming out the pit lane, but to be fair, there could only be one on that pit exit, and it was David Bauer in the end, and Shepka now finds himself once again in that P6. But to be fair, definitely digging deep here and looking for that top five, throwing everything he's got at it as he rolls his way through Piratella, and we can see Daniel Smith not too far behind either. Torque Steer Racing coming out in force today, and both drivers right up there contesting the top 10. Meanwhile, Justin Rhodes into the pit lane and making his way through, and I wonder whether Justin Rhodes, I think it's a drive-through penalty here for Justin Rhodes, because I have not had anything about him taking the stop itself, so that's very unfortunate. If so, for the Breakfast for Dinner driver, it has not been a happy day for one member of the Breakfast for Dinner family. It is the case for Rhodes. It is not a race to remember down in P15 now, but as he rolls his way through Tambrello, still time on the cards, and you never know what could happen. Given the number of drive-through penalties we've seen so far, I would not be surprised if a number of drivers are close to the threshold for a drive-through. We don't wish it on anyone, of course, but it's just a thought in the mind right now. We could see a couple more drive-throughs before all is said and done. Hopefully no disqualifications. Heaven forbid disqualifications there. It would ruin the race results for drivers, but still, we will wait and see. As meanwhile, James Carr leads by 2 seconds ahead of John Lauzon. And with pit stop season, I believe, complete, as we've got Jesse Butters in the pit once again. Let's take you through that order as it currently stands. So after what is 37.5 minutes of racing, by the time he clears Toaster Corner, it is the case that James Carr, the breakfast for dinner driver, after a brilliant start, continues to lead this race as he charges on through and holds on to that lead by a 2-second margin over John Lauzon from Beaver Buzz. However, the story between these two, that 2-second margin doesn't tell it all. It is the case that John Lauzon, gaining 2 places at the start, has been really hustling at the rear of Carr. He's lost out a little bit in the pit stops, but it is the case that John Lauzon definitely has the pace and is trying to close back up. We'll have to keep our eyes on these two. I think there will be some sparks between the two of them before we reach that checkered flag. Meanwhile, best of the rest running in P3 here. Micah Hendricks, the Blue Flag Motorsports driver, showing a lot of pace earlier on, but it is the case that as the race has gone on, he's settled down into a bit of a rhythm after a couple of major near-miss moments, which saw him drop down a couple of places and have to regain them. But the Blue Flag Motorsports Veloster driver here really putting in a strong performance in P3, albeit he is the best part of 13 seconds behind Lauzon in P2. But between Hendricks and Logan McKenzie, it is the case we have what is a 6-second gap, and Logan McKenzie getting the jump on his rivals in the pit window, in the fact that coming on in late, coming in on first we should say, and in the end using the undercut in order to gain some race lap time, and now ahead of David Bauer by a whole second or so. David Bauer P5 here with the charging pack of Talksteer Racing, chasing after what is the breakfast for dinner driver. That's Matt Shepka in P6 in a revived form in that Honda. Definitely really pushing hard here today, and it shows, and we love to see Shepka flying, and behind him Daniel Smith, his teammate in P7. The Veloster driver at Talksteer Racing having a better day compared to the Red Bull Ring last week. And indeed right now Talksteer Racing both trying to claim that position of David Bauer as we follow them down the start finish straight here, and as they head up towards turn number 2 in towards Tamburello. Will we see a potential move this time from Shepka? I think we may. He's going to look for it here, but he's a little bit too far back, but he's definitely considering it. Meanwhile, in P8, we have Aaron Lahr here. It is the case he is 15 seconds off of Daniel Smith, but in a comfortable P8, he has got an advantage of what is 8 seconds ahead of Robert Abrams, as he makes his way down the start-finish straight here. Robert Abrams started off quite strong in the race after a difficult qualifying session, but it is the case that now, as he makes his way down towards turn number 2, having difficulties as the race has worn on, and running in P9 here, our championship leader, it could be the case that he's going to lose some of his advantage to other drivers in the field as he rolls his way through Tamburello and down towards Villeneuve. Behind him, Gus Blondell, the leader in the Delta class. Didn't have the qualifying session he wanted, but he's definitely had the race he's wanted so far. He steered cleared and battled his way up into the lead of the Delta class, and right now running the final driver in the top 10. P11, meanwhile, our pole sitter for the Delta class, it was Dom Savio, who after that early incident, indeed that drive-through penalties, we're to understand it, Dom Savio now making his way back up to speed in P11 as meanwhile, oh goodness me, and that is Shepka off. We had to cut away there briefly, Acquaminarale, and Shepka's got it wrong, and well, it is the case that David Bauer has been passed by Daniel Smith, and I wonder there whether there's a bit of a coming together between David Bauer and Shepka into Acquaminarale. We did not catch that on camera, which is unfortunate, but we will keep our eyes on a potential comeback from Shepka as time wears on here. But it may be the case the two have come together, and Daniel Smith has picked up the pieces in P5 now as he rolls his way through. And coming back down the order, we look to Dom Savio here, as we were saying, had a difficult start to his race, but trying to make a recovery drive, and still the best part of what is 17 seconds off of Gus Blondell, but chasing after him. But Daniel Sedino behind him, also keeping him honest. Daniel Sedino in at P12 here, completing the current podium of the Delta class if things were to finish as they currently stand. P12, and he's gained 1 place since the start. He's had a relatively good race. Fernando Takahashi, 4 places up since the starting position, and the Audi driver, to be fair, hasn't put a foot wrong. It's just the case he has not had the pace in that Audi compared to his rivals, and he's gained a lot of places based on consistency and just keeping it on track. Adrian Fedorowski in P14 here, the QZ Motorsport trying plenty of battles, and indeed as he makes his way down the hill into Ravazza, chasing after Takahashi and gradually gaining by a couple of attempts a lap. Could we see him put the fight on for P13 towards the end of this race? Justin Rhodes P15, the breakfast for dinner driver, having a very difficult day here at the Imola circuit. A drive-through to be added to his pit stop. It's not worked out. And then Spencer Cockane in P16. And it is the case that our P16 driver with the door number 16 not having a happy race either, and right now just trying to bring it to the end with Jesse Bodas then the last of our runners out of our 18 runners originally. He's the last of them continuing to run, and we've got 17 drivers out on circuit, and the 100 drivers had to make a number of visits to the pit lane. There's definitely been 2 pit stops in there, but also I think there may have been a drive-through, although do not quote me on that. And we did have the earlier retirement of Jerome Virgil after a major whack to the wall at turn number 13, which we didn't see on camera, but we did see the aftermath of it, and then a later incident which saw him jump to the pits a second time, and it was the case they have not been able to repair the car since then. But speaking of repairing the car, it will be the case if he doesn't get it right, they could go off circuit and end up having to repair his race. Robert Abrams here under pressure from Gus Blondell, and Abrams really struggling as he's gone deeper and deeper into this race here, the yellow flag motorsports driver, and Blondell right now looking on course to potentially make the move here for P9, and this will be significant for him. This will be a huge boost to his confidence in the fact that right now he is chasing the championship leader and he's hounding him down towards Ravazza, but it does look as though Blondell is right now playing it safe as well. He knows that he doesn't have to beat Abrams, albeit in the overall championship it'll be worth more points. But at the same time, he's got to play this smart, and I think Abrams, to be fair, if he feels threatened, will go defensive. We do know how strong Abrams' defensive capabilities are as he makes his way down towards turn number 2. As they head on to that next lap, they head on to lap number 23. It is the case we still do have some battles emerging, and right at the front of the field, this is James Carr, our leader. Remember what we said about John Lauzon earlier, the fact he was 2 seconds behind, but don't take that as a given gap. Well, it is the case that gap has come down to 7/10 of a second as they make the way for Minerali this time around, and it is definitely the case right now that Lauzon is gradually bringing that gap down little by little. That last lap took 7/100ths out of Carr. To be fair, Carr put in his best middle sector of the race so far on this lap, and as they roll the way through the auto chicane, I think the difference here is Carr is definitely really pushing the limits right now in terms of running right to the edge of where you're allowed to drive at Imola, versus Lauzon is taking a much more conservative approach here and really trying to nurse the car and nurse those lines. It's two very different driving styles, and James Carr here driving like a man who wants that win in this Alpha race. And I think it'll be his first Alpha win of the season unless I'm mistaken, and as the number 19 driver heads the timeline this time around, it's only the case that 15 minutes plus the final lap separates him from that potential winner's champagne as he makes his way to the timeline and heads on through, setting a personal best of 53.641, but to be fair, Lauzon that lap is a 53.629. Lauzon is not letting him disappear off into the distance, but James Carr is definitely giving it everything right now. Meanwhile, Gus Blondell by comparison continuing to run behind Robert Abrams here in the battle for P9, the Delta versus Alpha conundrum as they make the way up towards Ravazza, and then in between them and our leaders we have Daniel Smith here, who right now has got David Bow continuing to chase after him, and as they make the way under the billboard, we ride on board with David Bow, who's running P6, the breakfast for dinner driver, definitely trying to come back here at Daniel Smith in the late stages. As they roll their way then through Tamburello and out towards Villeneuve they go. Yes, it is a case about getting the run, and to be fair, the Elantra, the stronger of the cars in the opening half of the lap, was their emphasis on a higher average speed, but as they then make their way towards Villeneuve, what we can see there is a case of Smith taking a bit too much momentum into Villeneuve and going out onto the gravel, and as they head through Tosa here, Bow going for the cutback line there to set himself up with a run up towards Piratella, but Smith getting a very nice exit out of Tosa, and that keeps him ahead for the time being as we're hitting Fernando Takahashi is into the pit lane. I wonder if that's for a potential drive-through penalty, but as they head through Piratella, it is a case of Bauer here staying right behind Smith, who goes slightly defensive there before the run into Minerali. I think trying to signal to Bauer, and don't try it this time around, and as they come through, I think Smith really struggling, and in fact Smith they're going sideways almost through turn number 10, and will Bauer he's going to have the run up the hill towards the auto chicane. He'll be on the inside under braking, but he backs out there, and I think it's sensible from Bauer. He knows he's got the pressure on his rival, and Smith, if he continues to make these little micro mistakes, it's going to hurt. But meanwhile, speaking of mistakes, here goes John Lauzon into the lead of the race. What is James Carr is into the pit lane, and we believe this is a drive-through penalty. Unless we're mistaken, it is the case that James Carr has hit that ×9 limit, and it has cost him very dearly as he heads on through, and as he makes his way through the pit lane where he tries to shortcut it as much as possible, but either way, a drive-through is a drive-through. And as they make the way on through, well, where will Micah Hendricks fit onto this? Micah Hendricks just went underneath our camera. He's up to P2, James Carr P3, and well, Logan McKenzie a bit too far back by comparison, but meanwhile, here comes David Bowers at P5. He's in P6 at the moment, chasing after Smith, and as they make the way down towards turn number 2, again, staying behind just about. It is the case that Smith just able to keep that gap alive enough for the time being as they roll their way through Tamburello, but We did say earlier, do not rule out the possibility of more drive-through penalties on the radar, and it is the case. We've just seen a major one which could be race defining, because now it is the case that John Lauzon is your race leader, 15 seconds clear of Micah Hendricks. But the question is now for John Lauzon, and indeed for all of our drivers who are up towards the front, do they continue to push hard, or do they back it off and run the risk of somebody else behind them pushing hard and finding the right balance between pushing hard and the track limits and not picking up that drive through? But meanwhile, that's not on the mind of either of the drivers here in the battle for P9. Gus Blondell chasing after Robert Abrams, and right now the yellow flag motorsports driver here keeping a Blondell at bay as they head through Tosa once again. But as they roll on out, you can imagine at any point we could potentially see Blondell get a little bit closer, or can Abrams finally put this battle to bed, because he does seem to settle down there. He's got the gap up to 4 attempts as they make their way towards Peratella, and it looks though here Abrams is starting to find that momentum in the late stages. But as he makes his way on down towards, what is that, Minerale here, going defensive initiate and swinging the car into turn number 9. That is a Lancia that definitely does not want to cooperate with its driver. And, well, Blondell closing up there, snatching 2 attempts out of him as they make their way up towards the Alta chicane. And as they head on in here, we can see Blondell looking for the move up the inside. But it's the case of whilst Abrams gives him the space, remember, it is what is a right into left chicane. So, therefore, Abrams taking that outside line was able to go defensive quite nice into the second part of Alta, and Blondell was not far enough ahead to essentially try and curve the car around. So as a result, it does stay as is for now, but Blondell definitely putting that pressure on as they make their way down to Ravatsa 1, and as they roll the way on through, I think Abrams at this point, it's not going to be much breathing room. It's going to be harassment to the very end from our Delta driver behind. As they head to the timeline this time around, it is the case they head on to lap number 26. Indeed, those laps continue to accumulate here. The tyres continue to pick up that wear, and as they do, it is the case we could still see some major moments on the cars. We're by no means over yet, as we see Daniel Smith here running P5. Behind him is David Bauer, and Bauer right now has been trying to stay with Smith for some time. But the question will be, of course, how long will it be before the Elantra's front tyres give way? We do know that the Elantra struggles with that front tyre wear towards the end of the race, where it's in a sprint, or alternatively in a feature race in these Alpha Challenge rounds. And it is the case that the tyres really do start to go in that final 15 minutes. Has Bauer hit the cliff? Meanwhile, speaking of hitting the cliff, well, he's tapped the rear end there of what is Abrams, and I think at this point Robert Abrams may be feeling as though he's hitting the cliff on those tyres as we ride on board here over our P9 driver as he makes his way up towards Piratella. But Blondell has definitely been able to preserve the tyres a little bit more as he decides to take a bit of a rallycross line there through the kink that heads up towards Piratella corner. We'll get away with that once or twice, but it's not going to work out in the long term. And as they make their way down at Minerale, it is the case that Robert Abrams at this point feeling safer now, but this is where Blondell closes up. Just so much more stable is Blondell by comparison of Abrams. And as they head up towards Alta chicane this time around, well, the gap's a bit more compared to how it was last time, ran an extra 10th in fact. But Abrams definitely right now really struggling to get the car to just simply settle under braking into the corners. And I think that is the tyre wear plus that rear brake bias. The two are coming together, and it is not a positive combination. And as they make their way down towards Ravatsa this time, well, Abrams is going to be on pressure here as they head down towards the braking zone. Blondell up the inside for P9 potentially. Abrams gives him the space on the inside there. It's going to be a very tight apex of Blondell, but to be fair, he commits to it. And as they make their way out of the corner, well, Blondell is not shy to try and take on the championship leader. And as they make their way out of the final corner to head on to another lap, 9 minutes to go plus the final lap. Blondell definitely right now has got the bit between his teeth and is going hunting for that P9 as they make the way up towards Tamburello this time around. But can he find the move? He's going to look to the inside. The door's been left open. But at the same time, I think Robert Abrams there just able to outbrake his rival, and that's the one thing Blondell does not have on Abrams, is the ability to brake late. Regardless of whether the tyres are still there and whether the brakes are feeling stronger, we can see it is the case that Robert Abrams just has more confidence in the car to be able to brake just a little bit deeper into each and every corner, albeit it's risk versus reward. But at the same time, it's two different driving styles here, and it's very interesting to see whether it's quite a flat style of racing for Blondell. He's putting a lot of pressure on, but he's not really losing any composure controlling the car. Meanwhile, Robert Abrams, by comparison, it's almost as if the car is a ballerina, just balancing on the front constantly, the rear of the car lifting up, but it's a slowdown penalty there, I think, for Abrams, unless I'm mistaken, or Abrams has decided to let it go, but he drops to P10 there. Well, that was a little bit of a surprise, but I think it may be a slight slowdown, and in return, it is the case that Blondell has taken that P9. His perseverance has worked to perfection in the end, and well, he almost gets it wrong. They're coming out of that Criminale. Hopefully that's not a slowdown for him in return, because if so, this will be going the other way now, and indeed that battle for P9 will only open up once again. And speaking of opening up here, look up the road, and you'll find here is Aaron Lahr, the talkative racing driver, who is only 2.5 seconds ahead of this battle for P9. I wonder if he's falling backwards towards it, because in terms of his pace right now, the only driver who he's outrunning in terms of pace inside the top 10 is Robert Abrams. Everybody else is matching him, if not going faster. I think Aaron Lahr is struggling for a little bit of pace this late on, but we'll have to wait and see whether that is the case or not, whether he's just had a couple of laps where he's decided to take it easy before turning the wick up. And to be fair, that'd be unfortunate given what he's demonstrated today after a difficult day at the Red Bull Ring. But still, Robert Abrams making his way after Blondell here for P9 as the crowd comes over the start-finish straight here. And as they head down towards Tamburello, it is the case. You see Blondell goes defensive initially. Will Abrams send up the inside here, being late on the brakes? No, he waits his turn. I think he's going to try and stay with Blondell to the very end and make the move on the last lap, given how much of a challenge that car is to drive as it currently stands. And as they make their way out to Tamburello, 7 minutes still on the clock. And right now, Robert Abrams trying to get himself back into P9. As they head on around, and I would agree with you there, Logan McKenzie in the YouTube chat. Gus Blondell definitely driving insanely well and demonstrating why he is leading in that Delta class here today on circuit. And I think this is a little bit of a message to Connor Achatella as well, which if Blondell gets a clear run, he will be taking on the Delta class leader in the championship later on in the season. But we'll have to wait to see how that plays on out. But meanwhile, we can only go with the present, and it is the case that number 17 driver here still under pressure for that P9, but definitely coping with the pressure well. Meanwhile, looking from him to what is Daniel Smith here, running in P5. It is the case, it would seem the battle for P5 between himself and David Bauer has calmed down a little bit since we last looked at it. The gap has now opened up to just shy of a second. 9 tenths as they made the way under braking into Ravazza. And as they roll the way through the double left-hander, it is the case at this point in time, Daniel Smith looking to hold on to that final spot inside the top 5, which, to be fair, I think he would argue that he has worked insanely hard for. And I would have to agree with you, is the fact that Daniel Smith, after the difficult day at the Red Bull Ring, he's needed a turnaround. Of course, we're not going to sing all these laurels yet, and given the fact we've still got time to go and everything can happen until the very end of the checkered flag, but that P5 I think would be a resemblance of the craft and the effort that has gone on in. And to be fair, at the same time, his teammate Matthew Shepka here, it is the case, whilst he's running in P7, let's not take away from the fact that he was right in that fight for P5 until an instant about the midpoint of the race. And right now that P7 in the number 490 car is a P7 that has been worked hard for, and Shepka has definitely really driven well here today, despite that off at Criminale. And as he rolls on through here, not quite able to catch up to the top 6 anymore, but comfortably running 11.5 seconds clear at Aaron Lahr. And I think he will look to take those P7 points home and convert them into the bank. As he makes his way through toast at this point, it is the case that we do look up towards our leader here of John Lauzon, who as he makes his way past our stationary camera, it is the case the Beaver Buzz driver right now 14 seconds clear of Micah Hendricks. And well, it is the case that John Lauzon at this point, he doesn't need to do anything spectacular. He just needs to get the car home. And it is the case as he rolls his way out through the double left of Ravazza this time. 5 minutes left, plus also that final lap. It is looking good for the Beaver Buzz driver, indeed, to add to his major points haul from the Red Bull Ring here. And this season is turning around for John Lauzon. In this case, he had a difficult opening couple rounds. Things didn't always go as planned, but right now it is definitely looking as though the momentum is on his side. And well, speaking of momentum here, Micah Hendricks running in that P2. He has still got James Carr not too far behind, and as he crosses the timeline this time around, let's take a look at those lap times. At 54.262 for Hendricks. James Carr sets a personal best. My good lord, the man takes a whole 9 tenths out of Hendricks. Well, James Carr, of course, who was leading for so long in the race, and then a drive-through penalty paid dividends to that. It is the case that Carr down in P3, he has not given up on getting back into P2 here. That's a whole second takeout now at Hendricks, and right now that gap is down to just over 1.5 seconds. If he carries on like this, James Carr will be battling for that P2 for the final couple of laps here, and well, Micah Hendricks right now surely has got to be thinking that can't be a 53 he's just set, because it is the case that James Carr is flying here in the closing stages, and whilst he feels like he's been robbed of the win, it is the case that he can try and rob Hendricks of that P2 and gain some major points on the board. To be fair, the points of P3 are good, but the points of P2 are even better, and that fastest lap, I think, is going to go in the bank as the fastest lap of this race session. I can't see there being any faster laps here over the course of the remainder of the time. Nobody else is even close to the 53s right now. Everybody's in the 54s or higher, and James Carr has definitely delivered. But speaking of delivering, we ride on board here with Robert Abrams, who tries to deliver a counter-attack versus Gus Blondell for P9. And you can see just in front, in fact, that is Aaron Lahr, who they've closed up to. So Lahr right now is within 2 seconds of this battle. But you can imagine that if it carries on with this trend, that last lap, Aaron Lahr was on a 54.89, Blondell 54.59, Abrams a 54.52 as he drifts his way there into Piratella. Those tyres absolutely on a knife edge right now. Robert Abrams, I think, absolutely loves driving the car on the knife edge, it would seem. But as they roll the one down, they're taking half a second minimum a lap out of Aaron Lahr. I think there's a battle for P8 to the cards here, as we see at Gus Blondell. They're taking a lot of sausage curve through turn number 10, and as they make the way up towards Alta here, Abrams is going to get the better run, but will he have enough on the brakes? Does he go all the way in? No, he waits once again here. He thinks about it. I thought he was going to go for it, and Carr sets another matching lap. It's a 53.324 for James Carr. Hendricks does drop into the 53s at 53.927. There is a response from Mike Hendricks in the battle for P2. Is that response enough come the end of this race? We haven't got long to go. 2 more laps as our leader John Lauzon right now is on what is lap number 31. We will have a 30-second lap here. We've still got some time to go as we continue to ride on board here with Robert Abrams, who tries to close up to Blondell. He's doing 3 attempts here. He may have the run down towards turn number 2, but of course now Blondell will be feeling a very distant toe off of Aaron Lahr. That may just help him as that gap's come down to 2 attempts. They're running out a straight line here, and as they head up towards turn number 2, can Abrams go for it? No, he has to wait. I think now there's a little bit of toe being afforded to at Blondell, and as a result, it is the case the Delta driver here is being given an extra lifeline, albeit it is the case you can see Abrams all over the back of him there heading up through Tamburello, and as they make the way up towards what is Villeneuve this time around for the penultimate time of asking, Abrams is definitely looking strong, and I think Blondell at this point maybe feeling as though the car's hitting its limit and he hasn't got much more to give. Has he got enough to give to stay in the fight just for the remaining 2 laps? Whereas they make the way out of Tosa here and head up towards what is turn number 8, Piratella. It is the case that right now Robert Abrams thinking about trying to gain 2 places in the very last minute moments of this race. Can he gain the 1, or is it the case that Blondell will be able to keep him at bay? Meanwhile, our race leader here heads on to the final lap. 30 seconds to go on the clock. He'll get 1 more in, and John Lauzon heads that timeline to start our final lap, lap 32. Barry Flagg waves the white flag, and it is the case Lauzon right now looking untouched. Was Micah Hendricks in right at the end, and surely this has got to be a drive-through. Don't tell me it's a pit stop for fuel right at the end. He's under fueled, but it releases James Carr either way back into P2, and he was closing right at the end. But James Carr now will feel as though this is the best he can get after everything that happened, and Logan McKenzie in a surprise turn now moves up to P3 with Daniel Smith P4. We've got David Bauer P5. Hendricks makes his way through. There was no stationary time. Micah Hendricks for a drive-through right at the end, being denied the podium, and instead now it's a P6 at most for Micah Hendricks. Or is it? Of course, we've still got a final lap, and any drive-throughs picked up on that final lap will be converted to post-race time penalties. As we see a Gus Blondell here going on to the final lap. Can he find a way past Aaron Lahr into turn 2? We see Aaron Lahr going defensive. Blondell's going to be tested around the outside here as they roll the way into Tamburello chicane. He'll go for the cutback line to get the charge up towards Villeneuve, and as he makes his way through turn number 4, it is the case now Blondell very close as they head up towards the chicane. But can he look for the move? Aaron Lahr puts the car in the middle of the road. I don't think so. I think it is the case that we'll be seeing that Aaron Lahr holds the place for now as they roll their way on through, and goodness me, Blondell gets it a bit wrong, and it's the case that Abrams is going to go round the outside, but Blondell Blondell's not going to give this up. He goes all in on the brakes. It's a Tosa. He opens the steering there to cover off Abrams as well. Blondell holds on for now. But speaking of holding on, he's been holding on to this lead for some time. And as he makes his way through the final major corner, he's been absolutely faultless today, has the Beaver Buzz driver John Lauzon. And as he heads through the final kink, here he comes. It's the number 77 car that takes the checker flag. John Lauzon from Beaver Buzz is your winner here at Imola in round number 7 of the Alpha Touring Challenge Season 5, taking the win in the end by 14 seconds ahead of his rival James Carr, who was on course for the win until a pesky drive-through denied him it all. But in the end, he will return to P2 and take second place on the podium in a superb drive from Carr. And then it will be Logan McKenzie, who has been on a brilliant run of form, who takes the final spot on the overall podium. P3 for the Yellow Flag Motorsports driver in a brilliant day. Daniel Smith in a resurgent run to P4, and then it will be David Bauer who crosses the line P5 ahead of Micah Hendricks. P6 in the end, denied a podium for a last-minute drive-through penalty. Matt Shepker in the end in a P7, which is a sign of how hard he's battled today and how hard he's driven the car. Brilliant drive from the Torque Steer Racing driver, and then it will be Aaron Lahr who heads to the timeline to take P8. We're heading as a drive-through penalty for Gus Blondell, in fact, to the line. So Aaron Lahr P8, Robert Abrams P9, and Blondell will come on through to take a drive-through. I think that will be P10 for our Delta driver, which means in peculiar fashion, almost in Schumacher-esque fashion, if I remember correctly, my Formula 1 motorsport in history, Gus Blondell takes P10, which will be the Delta class win, we believe, at least on circuit it will, with Dom Savio coming home P11, recovering to P2 in the Delta class at the end. And then it will be Daniel Sedino who comes home P12 and completing the Delta podium ahead of what is Adrian Fedorowski in P13 as he makes his way through. Great battling from Adrian Fedorowski today, but not quite on the pace of his rivals as he heads that timeline to complete his race. And then it will be behind him Fernando Takahashi, the last of our drivers to finish on the lead lap. But before he does, Jesse Bodas finishes a lap down in P16, coming to the line. Justin Rhodes has already finished his race in P15, but Bodas P16, and then Fernando Takahashi completing the last of our finishers on the lead lap. The 998 driver coming home P14 in a day of battling for the Audi driver. But my goodness, what a brilliant race up and down the field. And let's take a look at those race results, subject to stewards' inquiries, of course. So after what was 60 minutes of racing here today at the Imola circuit in round number 7 of the Alpha Touring Challenge Season 5, as brought to you on iRacing, it is the case that John Lauzon in the end taking that brilliant victory, a well-deserved victory of 14 seconds over James Carr in P2. Of course, James Carr would have been just as much a deserved winner in that rivalry between the two of them, but it was a driver in the end that separated the two, and James Carr recovering to P2 with, of course, that drive-through for Micah Hendricks at the final deadlock. And in the end, Logan McKenzie finished P3 on the podium there for Yellow Flag Motorsports in a great day for McKenzie. Outside the podium, Daniel Smith with a superb P4, showing the pace in the Veloster. Dale Bauer completing the top 5. Micah Hendricks P6, unfortunate today to miss out on the podium, with Matt Shepker P7. And then Aaron Lahr, Robert Abrams and Dom Savio in the end completing the top 10. And we do have the confirmation there. It is the case that with that drive-through penalty, and it was the case the time penalty being applied post-race, it would seem, Dom Savio being promoted to your winner in terms of the Delta Class P10 ahead of Daniel Sedino in P11. And then it was the case that Adrian Fedorowski completing the Delta podium. So it was the case Blondell being severely punished for a time penalty there and finishing P13. Fernando Takahashi P14, Justin Rhodes P15, Jesse Bodas P16, Spencer Cockayne and Jerome Virgil completing our standings. Of course, that unfortunate retirement for Jerome Virgil early on in the race after that major whack to the wall. But those are results, ladies and gentlemen. And whilst we don't have the standings for after round number 7, we'll bring you those updated standings. And next time out, it is the case that we can now say thank you very much for watching. And if you did enjoy today's broadcast, enjoy the show, and you want to know more about the Alpha Touring Challenge, you may be sat there right now thinking, I love touring cars, I race on iRacing, I have access to all those touring cars, how can I get involved? Or you just want to know a little bit more about what we do at ATC, then why not go to our official website? That is, of course, alphatouringchallenge.wordpress.com. Or if you're more of a Discord person, you can always go to our Discord server, the invite link available on screen there, where you can catch up with the admins, the drivers, and find out all the details. But it is the case, speaking of the details, our drivers won't be sweating the details for next time, they'll be heading to Donington Park. They'll be returning to the United Kingdom for the second of the series visits to the United Kingdom and the last of them at a circuit which, of course, is synonymous with touring car, much like Alton Park earlier on in the season. It is the case. It'll be fast. It'll be furious. There's plenty of sweepers and blind apexes, and that is what it's all about in touring cars. And we bring you all the racing action of round number 8 as if it were live on Sunday, the 4th of September, 2022. You will not want to miss it, that I can assure you. But until then, ladies and gentlemen, we have been the Alpha Touring Challenge. I've been your host and commentator, Paul TX141 Walsh, also known as Britain of Spit, depending on what media you follow me on. And until next time, have a brilliant weekend. Remember to stay safe, stay well, stay smiling, but most importantly, remember to stay on track. Good night.